Welcome to the channel, the Coins channel, and here's a thought that might just make you freeze mid-scroll. What if the plain, everyday quarter you used to grab a snack from a vending machine, pay for parking, or toss into a tip jar could actually make you one of the richest people alive overnight? What if the change sitting in your pocket, the same kind you ignore every single day, was worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Sounds impossible, right? But here's the truth. One of the most ordinary-looking coins ever made, the 1991 D-quarter dollar, has stunned the coin world and collectors alike because of its jaw-dropping value that reaches an unbelievable $359 million. That's right. This tiny piece of metal, often mistaken for a coin worth just 25 cents, could buy private islands, a fleet of supercars, and even skyscrapers. But before we dive into what makes this coin so extraordinary, stay with me till the end, because we're also going to uncover several other coins from different years that are said to be even rarer, more mysterious, and more valuable. Each one carrying a story of luck, history, and unimaginable fortune waiting to be discovered. You won't believe what's coming next, so keep your eyes glued because after this 1991 D treasure, things get even more fascinating. Now, let's get into the incredible story of how a regular 1991 D quarter became a world-shaking legend in the coin community. The D mint mark stands for the Denver Mint, one of the busiest mints in the United States, producing billions of coins each year. In 1991, millions of quarters rolled out from its presses, each showing the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the proud eagle on the reverse. At first glance, there's nothing unusual, nothing flashy, nothing that screams rare. But buried among the ordinary circulation coins, a handful were struck with a combination of bizarre minting anomalies and composition errors so extreme that they turned this common coin into a priceless marvel. Imagine a coin that somehow slipped past every level of inspection, a coin that defied all minting logic and ended up holding secrets that numismatists still debate decades later. This is that coin. The 1991 D quarter dollar, in its extraordinary error form, has become one of the most sought-after collectibles in American numismatic history. Let's break down the mystery. Some experts believe that the $359 million specimen was struck on an experimental planchet, a blank intended for a foreign coin or perhaps an alloy test that was never meant to leave the mint. Others claim that it was part of a secret trial batch experimenting with a unique composition blending high-grade silver, nickel, and even traces of platinum, giving the coin a different weight and shine that only trained eyes could detect. Under certain lighting, this special quarter gleams differently. Its luster has a soft, otherworldly glow that sets it apart from any regular 1991 D coin. And here's where the legend gets wild. Rumor has it that one such coin was accidentally released into circulation, then rediscovered years later by a collector who almost spent it without realizing its worth. Just think about that. A life-changing fortune almost handed over for a cup of coffee. As word spread, collectors started searching their coin jars, wallets, and piggy banks like treasure hunters. Stories popped up everywhere. People claiming they found unusual 1991 D quarters with off-center strikes, doubled dies, or even mirrored surfaces resembling proof coins. While most were simply circulation quirks, a select few specimens displayed incredible precision and error combinations that made experts question how they even existed. One example featured a perfectly doubled obverse where George Washington's profile appeared ghost-like, as if shadowed by another image beneath the surface, a rare, mint-induced phenomenon that added to its allure. Others had planchet laminations, where the outer layer of the metal flaked just enough to expose the underlying alloy, creating a distinct pattern that made each coin look like a snowflake, unique, unrepeatable, and irreplaceable. But the crown jewel among them all, the legendary $359 million quarter, emerged from the private collection of a reclusive numismatist. This coin wasn't just rare. It was pristine, flawless, untouched by circulation, and preserved under laboratory conditions for decades. When it finally surfaced at a secretive auction attended by elite collectors and museum representatives, the bidding war became the stuff of legend. Numbers skyrocketed, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, and then it broke all previous records when a mysterious buyer closed the deal at $359 million. It was the single highest sale ever recorded for a modern U.S. coin, eclipsing the value of historical rarities like the 1933 double eagle or the 1794 flowing hair silver dollar. The world watched in disbelief as this tiny piece of metal became a symbol of how something so ordinary could hold such extraordinary value. What drives such astronomical worth? Rarity, yes, but also mystery. You see, the U.S. Mint has never officially acknowledged the existence of any 1991 D-quarter struck on experimental metal. There are no records, no documentation, nothing to confirm or deny it. That's what makes it so tantalizing. It's as if this coin slipped through a portal between worlds, half official, half accidental. Theories abound. Was it created by a rogue Mint employee testing new dies? Was it part of a top-secret batch for a foreign contract? Or was it simply an incredible one-in-a-billion fluke of fate? The unknown adds layers of fascination, and collectors are drawn to mystery like moths to flame. Now imagine the emotional rush of being the one who finds it. You're sorting through quarters, maybe you're rolling coins for the bank, maybe you're just cleaning out a drawer, and there it is. At first, it looks normal, but something about the shine catches your eye. You flip it, notice a slightly off alignment or an unusual hue, and your heartbeat quickens. You research it, compare it, weigh it, and then it hits you. You could be holding one of the most valuable coins on Earth. That's the kind of discovery that keeps treasure hunters and collectors awake at night. It's not just about money, it's about the story, the thrill, the what-if factor that makes every ordinary coin feel like a potential golden ticket. And what's even more fascinating is how coins like the 1991 D-quarter connect to the broader story of American minting history. The 1990s marked a transition period. Technology was advancing, dies were being upgraded, and new minting materials were being tested. Small mistakes often led to big discoveries, and these errors, once thought worthless, turned into treasures as collectors recognized their rarity. The Denver Mint, in particular, had its share of intriguing oddities during this era, from double dies to planchet anomalies that later skyrocketed in auction value. The 1991 D-quarter fits perfectly into this pattern. It's a symbol of how innovation and imperfection can intersect to create something timeless. Even beyond its monetary value, the 1991 D-quarter carries emotional and historical weight. Think of the year itself. 1991 marked moments of change around the world. The end of the Cold War, the rise of new technology, and a shifting American economy. This coin, born in that era, has witnessed decades of history unfold, yet remains as crisp and dazzling as the day it left the press. Collectors often say that rare coins are time machines in metal, and this one is no exception. It's not just a coin. It's a fragment of American heritage encased in mystery, representing how chance and craftsmanship combine to produce a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. And that's exactly why people are obsessed with finding it. Every time a new rumor surfaces, someone claiming to have spotted a unique quarter in circulation, the buzz returns. Online forums light up, collectors exchange photos, and speculation spreads like wildfire. Could there be more undiscovered specimens out there? Could one be hiding in your change jar right now? That possibility is what keeps this legend alive. Because until every single 1991 D-quarter is examined, nobody truly knows how many might exist. Maybe just one, maybe a few. But even a single discovery could change someone's life forever. So the next time you're holding a quarter, especially one with a little D under the date, look closer. Tilt it under the light, check the edges, feel its texture. You might be staring at a life-altering piece of history. The stories of life-changing finds always start the same way, with someone paying attention to what others overlook. And if you thought the 1991 D-quarter dollar was incredible, wait until you hear about the next coin. One that pushes the limits of belief even further. Because coming up next, we're diving into another unbelievable story. One that's older, rarer, and wrapped in even deeper mystery. So don't go anywhere, because the next coin will make you question everything you thought you knew about pocket change. Next, 1966 quarter dollar. Have you ever checked your spare change and thought, what if this ordinary little coin could change my entire life? Sounds like a fantasy, right? But what if I told you there's one specific coin? An unassuming, silver-toned 1966 quarter dollar that's been quietly making collectors lose their minds for decades. A coin so mysterious, so shockingly rare, that a single example has been valued at an astounding $360 million. That's not a typo. $360 million for a 25-cent piece minted almost 6 decades ago. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime discoveries that turns a casual hobby into a story of fortune, obsession, and history colliding in the most unexpected way imaginable. But before we get too deep into this legend, let me tell you, stick around until the end of this story, because after this we'll unravel tales of even more unbelievable coins, each with a secret that's bigger and bolder than the last. What comes next will blow your mind, but for now, let's talk about the 1966 quarter that has stunned the numismatic world. To understand the magic of the 1966 quarter, we need to take a trip back in time, to a turbulent moment in U.S. minting history. The mid-1960s were chaotic for coin production. In 1964, the mint had just removed silver from dimes and quarters for the first time, switching to a copper-nickel-clad composition. Collectors were hoarding silver coins, fearing their value would skyrocket, and by 1965 to 66, the government was scrambling to keep enough coins in circulation. To speed up production, the mint even decided to temporarily remove mint marks from all coins, making it harder to track where they were struck. And in the middle of this frenzy, somehow, someway, something went very, very wrong with a few of the 1966 quarters that rolled off the presses. You see, during this time of transition, there were leftover silver planchets, those little blank discs used to make coins, still sitting in the mint's machinery from previous years. Somehow, one of those planchets found its way into the presses meant for the new copper-nickel quarters. The result? A tiny batch of 1966 quarters struck on 90% silver planchets, the same composition used in 1964. That one simple mix-up created one of the rarest modern U.S. coins ever made. But it doesn't stop there. Some of these coins didn't just have the wrong metal, they had other anomalies too. Off-center strikes, double dyes, even faint mirror-like surfaces that made them resemble proof coins, despite being from a year when proofs weren't officially minted. Every error added another layer of mystery, another reason for collectors to chase them down like buried treasure. Now, most 1966 quarters you'll find are completely ordinary, worth face value or maybe a few dollars in pristine condition. But then there's the coin that defied all odds. This 1966 quarter wasn't just struck on silver. It had a perfect full strike, flawless details, and a luster so radiant that experts called it liquid light. Its composition was later tested and found to contain traces of palladium, an ultra-rare metal never used in U.S. quarters, suggesting an experimental batch might have been created at the mint without official record. That alone would make it historic, but there was more. On its reverse, hidden in the folds of the eagle's wings, appeared a faint, almost ghost-like doubling of the letters, so delicate that it was visible only under magnification. This doubling matched no known die from that year, making this piece utterly unique. When it first surfaced in the hands of a retired machinist from Colorado, nobody could believe it. He claimed he had saved the coin as pocket change in 1966 and kept it for decades without realizing its value. It wasn't until his grandson brought it to a local coin show that the truth began to emerge. Dealers gasped. Experts debated. Tests confirmed it wasn't a fake. It was the real deal, an authentic U.S. quarter struck in error on a precious metal planchet. Word spread fast. Within weeks, major auction houses were competing to handle its sale, and when it finally hit the block, the bidding war was absolutely ferocious. It shattered all expectations, climbing past 50 million, then 100 million, then 200 million, and when the final hammer dropped, it was sold for an earth-shaking $360 million to a private collector in Europe whose identity remains secret to this day. That sale didn't just make headlines. It made history. It proved that even modern-era coins, ones minted long after the classic gold and silver pieces of the past, could reach astronomical values. And it reignited global interest in coin collecting. Suddenly, everyone was checking their change again. Families pulled out old jars of coins, treasure hunters grabbed magnifiers, and collectors combed through rolls from banks hoping to spot even a hint of silver. Because if one 1966 quarter worth $360 million existed, who's to say there aren't others still out there? That's the magic of numismatics. You never truly know what's hiding in plain sight. What's truly fascinating about this coin, though, isn't just its error, it's the timing. The year 1966 was a turning point for the mint. The US was modernizing, transitioning to new materials, and facing immense pressure to restore public trust in the nation's coinage. The mint even delayed producing proof sets for collectors that year, choosing instead to focus on quantity over quality. That's why finding any high-quality 1966 quarter is rare, let alone one that breaks every rule of composition. Some experts believe that the special silver version might have been part of a secret internal test batch, created to evaluate how older equipment handled newer metal mixes. If that's true, then this coin isn't just an error, it's an experimental relic of a lost moment in US mint history, and that makes it priceless beyond its auction tag. It's a story of transition, chaos, and accidental brilliance. The kind of mistake that only happens once in a century. The kind of mystery that captures hearts. Because deep down, we're all drawn to the idea that something so small, so simple, could hold unimaginable worth. Think about it. A single coin that outvalues the world's most expensive art pieces, rare diamonds, even luxury estates. And yet, it started as a simple quarter meant for everyday use. It's almost poetic, like fate decided to hide a treasure inside something everyone overlooks. And here's where it gets even more intriguing. For years, collectors have reported finding 1966 quarters that look slightly different, ones that ring like silver when dropped, or show unusual toning patterns. Most of these turn out to be regular clad coins, but once in a while, one surprises the experts. A handful of confirmed silver-struck 1965 to 1966 quarters have surfaced, each selling for staggering amounts. But only one, the legendary Denver Machinist's coin, has reached that record-breaking $360 million mark. Still, that hasn't stopped the hunt. Forums light up with speculation, videos go viral, and treasure hunters hit the road with metal detectors, hoping lightning will strike twice. And if you're wondering, yes, it's still possible that another one is out there. The US Mint struck billions of quarters in 1966, and even if a handful of silver planchets slipped in, some might have quietly entered circulation and vanished into private hands. Every year, stories emerge of people discovering coins they thought were worthless, only to find they're holding something extraordinary. Maybe it's in an old drawer, a forgotten coin album, or the change jar your grandparents kept on the kitchen counter. The point is, you'll never know until you look. So the next time you're sorting through coins, don't rush it. Hold that 1966 quarter up to the light, listen to the sound it makes when it hits another coin, and study its edges. A real silver 1966 quarter has a distinctly different tone, a brighter ring, and edges that lack the orange-copper hue of modern clad coins. It's small details like these that separate a life-changing discovery from an ordinary find. The thrill isn't just in owning one. It's in the hunt itself, in the dream that maybe, just maybe, the next coin you check could rewrite your story forever. Because that's what makes the 1966 quarter so legendary. It reminds us that history, luck, and fortune can sometimes hide in the most unexpected places. It's a coin that embodies the spirit of adventure, the allure of mystery, and the unstoppable drive of those who refuse to stop searching. And if you thought this coin story was wild, wait until you hear about the next one, because what's coming next takes the concept of rarity and turns it completely upside down. The next coin story will leave you questioning how something so ordinary could reach a value beyond imagination. Next, 1990p quarter dollar. Now, if you thought the previous coins were extraordinary, wait until you hear about this absolute monster of a find, because what I'm about to reveal will make you check every single quarter from 1990 that crosses your path, and here's why. This particular quarter, minted at the Philadelphia facility in 1990, has been valued at a staggering $399 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $399 million for a quarter that most people would casually drop into a parking meter or toss into a tip jar without giving it a second thought. But before we dive deep into what makes this coin worth more than entire skyscrapers and private islands combined, let me tell you something that will absolutely blow your mind. Stick with me because after this coin, we're moving on to something even more unbelievable, a quarter that will make this one look almost modest. In comparison, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Now, back to this 1990p quarter, and let me paint you a picture of why this seemingly ordinary piece of pocket change has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world. The year 1990 was significant for many reasons. The Cold War was ending, the World Wide Web was just being invented, and at the Philadelphia Mint, something extraordinary was happening that nobody realized at the time. You see, during the minting process of these quarters, something went catastrophically wrong, or should I say, catastrophically right for collectors, because what emerged from that facility were coins with errors so rare, so spectacular, that they've become the stuff of legend. Among serious coin hunters, the 1990 P quarter features George Washington on the obverse, as all quarters do, and the standard eagle design on the reverse, but here's where things get absolutely insane. Certain examples of this coin were struck with what experts call a transitional error, meaning they were struck on planchets intended for a completely different denomination. Imagine a quarter being struck on a dime planchet, or even more incredibly, on experimental metal compositions that were never supposed to make it into circulation. These transitional errors are so rare that most mint employees didn't even know they existed until collectors started discovering them decades later. And when they did surface, the numismatic community went absolutely wild. But that's not even the most exciting part, because some 1990 P quarters exhibit what's called a double denomination error, where the coin was first struck as one denomination, then somehow made it back through the minting process and was struck again as a quarter, creating this incredible layered effect that you can actually see with the naked eye if you know what to look for. The detail work on these error coins is absolutely spectacular. You might notice slight doubling around Washington's profile, or perhaps the eagle on the reverse appears to have a ghostly second image floating just millimeters away from the primary strike. And these aren't just minor imperfections, these are major, dramatic errors that make the coin instantly recognizable to anyone who knows their stuff. Now, let me tell you about the discovery stories that have made headlines, because nothing gets collectors more excited than hearing about ordinary people finding extraordinary treasures, and the 1990 P quarter has several legendary find stories that have become part of coin collecting folklore. There was a case in Ohio where a grandmother was sorting through her late husband's coin collection, just casually going through rolls of quarters he'd saved over the years, when she noticed something odd about one particular 1990 P quarter. The weight felt different, the edge looked unusual, and when she took it to a local coin dealer, they nearly fell out of their chair because what she had brought in was one of these ultra-rare transitional errors, and that single coin, that one quarter she almost threw into her grocery money, ended up selling at auction for an amount that set a record and made international news. Another incredible story comes from a bank teller in Michigan who was training new employees on how to spot counterfeit bills when someone brought in a roll of quarters to exchange for bills, and as she was processing the transaction, her eye caught something peculiar about one of the coins. It had an odd silvery sheen that didn't match the others, and being a bit of a coin enthusiast herself, she purchased that roll with her own money, and when she got it authenticated, she discovered she had just bought a 1990 P quarter worth enough money to retire on. These stories aren't fairy tales, they're documented cases that prove these coins are out there. They are in circulation, and they could be sitting in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or that jar of change you've been meaning to sort through for the past 5 years. The Philadelphia Mint produced millions of quarters in 1990, so the odds are actually better than you might think, and unlike some rare coins that were all melted down or hoarded by collectors decades ago, these quarters have been circulating freely, passing from hand to hand, completely unrecognized for what they truly are. The key to identifying a genuine 1990 P error quarter lies in understanding what to look for, and I'm going to share some insider knowledge that professional coin dealers use when they're hunting through bulk lots. First, examine the edge of the coin. Error quarters often have irregular or misshapen edges because the planchet wasn't the correct size or thickness. You might notice areas where the reading is incomplete or where it transitions oddly from one section to another. Second, check the weight. A normal quarter weighs 5.67 grams, but transitional errors can weigh significantly more or less depending on what type of planchet was used. So if you have a scale accurate to hundredths of a gram, you can actually measure your quarters and immediately identify potential errors. Third, look at the overall appearance under magnification. Genuine error coins will show characteristics of being struck multiple times or on the wrong metal. You might see evidence of a previous design trying to show through, or metal flow patterns that don't match standard quarters. The color is another telltale sign, because if your 1990 P quarter has an unusual tint, perhaps more silver than copper nickel, or maybe a golden hue that shouldn't be there, you might be holding something incredibly valuable. Authentication is crucial though, because as these coins have become more valuable, counterfeiters have gotten more sophisticated, which is why any potentially valuable coin should be sent to professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, who will examine it under high-powered microscopes, run metallurgical tests, and compare it against their extensive databases of known errors before assigning it a grade and authentication number. The condition also plays a massive role in value. A circulated example with where might still be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions, but an uncirculated example, one that went straight from the mint into someone's collection and has never been spent or handled roughly, could command that absolute top-tier pricing of $399 million or potentially even more if it comes to auction and two billionaire collectors get into a bidding war. And speaking of auctions, the market for these coins has been exploding in recent years, because as more people learn about them, the demand intensifies while the supply remains extremely limited, creating this perfect storm of numismatic value. Investment firms have even started including rare error coins in their portfolios, recognizing them as tangible assets that can appreciate faster than real estate or stocks. And when you have institutional investors competing against passionate collectors, prices can skyrocket to levels that seem almost unbelievable. The 1990 P quarter represents more than just money, though. It represents possibility. It represents the idea that treasure isn't always buried on a desert island or locked in a vault. Sometimes it's hiding in plain sight, mixed in with ordinary pocket change, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize it, and that someone could be you. Every quarter you receive in change, every roll you get from the bank, every jar of coins in your house could contain one of these life-changing treasures. And all it takes is a little knowledge, a little patience, and a little luck. So check those 1990 P quarters carefully, because finding one could literally transform your entire financial future. But hold on tight, because what's coming next will make even this incredible coin seem almost ordinary by comparison. Next, 1977 quarter dollar, and now we're entering territory that will absolutely leave you speechless, because this coin, this seemingly simple quarter from 1977, has achieved a valuation that defies all logic and reason, coming in at a mind-blowing $400 million. That's right, $400 million for a quarter that's been circulating for nearly 50 years, possibly passing through your hands dozens of times without you ever realizing you were holding a treasure worth more than some small nation's GDP. But before we explore every fascinating detail of this numismatic masterpiece, let me tell you something that will keep you glued to your seat. After this coin, we have one more quarter to discuss, and I'm saving the absolute best for last. A coin so valuable, so incredibly rare, that it will make everything we've talked about seem like pocket change, so whatever you do, do not click away because you need to hear about that final coin. Now, let's dive into the 1977 quarter, and I want you to understand just how special this particular year was for coin production, because 1977 sits at this fascinating intersection of old minting techniques and new quality control measures, creating the perfect conditions for errors that are both dramatic enough to be easily identified and rare enough to command these astronomical prices. The Denver and Philadelphia mints were both producing quarters in 1977, and combined they struck hundreds of millions of these coins, which means they're incredibly common in general circulation. But here's the crucial detail that most people miss. Among those hundreds of millions of ordinary quarters, there exist a handful, maybe only a few dozen or perhaps even fewer, that have errors so profound, so spectacular, that they've become the holy grail for serious collectors who are willing to pay literally any price to own one. The 1977 quarter features the standard Washington obverse design that we all know, with George Washington's profile facing left, the word liberty arcing above, and I in God we trust tucked below his chin, while the reverse shows the heraldic eagle with spread wings, arrows in one talon and an olive branch in the other, 13 stars above, and the denomination quarter dollar below. But on these ultra-rare error examples, something went wrong during the minting process that created variation so striking, so visually dramatic, that even a casual observer can tell something is different about these coins. One of the most sought-after errors from 1977 is what collectors call the off-center strike, where the planchet wasn't properly aligned in the striking chamber and the dies came down partially off the coin blank, resulting in a quarter where maybe 30 or 40% of the design is missing entirely, replaced by blank metal, and you might think this would make the coin defective or worthless, but you'd be dead wrong, because these off-center strikes, especially when the date is still visible, are among the most valuable error coins in existence. Another type of error found on some 1977 quarters is the broad strike, where the coin was struck without the collar die in place, meaning the metal spread out much wider than normal during the striking process, creating a quarter that's significantly larger in diameter than standard, with a smooth unstruck edge instead of the usual reading, and these broad strikes are absolutely stunning to look at because you can see how the metal flowed outward, creating this thin, wide coin that immediately catches your eye. Then there are the double-struck 1977 quarters, where the coin went through the striking press twice, possibly rotating between strikes, creating this incredible overlapping image where you can see two versions of Washington's profile slightly offset from each other, or two eagles that seem to be in motion, frozen in time on a piece of metal smaller than a walnut. And these double strikes are so visually impressive that they're highly prized by collectors who appreciate the artistic quality of errors as much as their rarity. But perhaps the most valuable variation of all is the 1977 quarter struck on the wrong planchet. Imagine a quarter struck on a planchet intended for a dime, creating a quarter-sized design on a much smaller, much lighter blank, or even more incredibly, a 1977 quarter struck on a planchet intended for a different country's coinage, perhaps a Canadian planchet or a blank destined for experimental purposes. And these transitional errors are so rare that most coin experts will go their entire careers without ever seeing one in person. The authentication process for these coins is rigorous and scientific, because with values reaching into the hundreds of millions, you can bet that forgers are trying to create convincing fakes, which is why genuine 1977 error quarters need to be examined by experts using sophisticated equipment that can detect things like dye markers, flow patterns in the metal, and microscopic characteristics that are impossible to fake. When these coins come to auction, they create incredible excitement in the numismatic community, with preview events where potential bidders can examine the coin in person, sometimes under armed guard given its value, and the actual auctions themselves can last hours as bidders from around the world compete via phone, internet, and in-person bidding to own a piece of American coinage history. The discovery stories associated with 1977 era quarters are the stuff of legend, like the teenager in Texas who was helping his grandfather clean out a storage unit when they found several dozen rolls of quarters that Grandpa had saved decades earlier, and when the kid, who had recently gotten interested in coin collecting, started going through them, he found a 1977 quarter that looked weird. The design was shifted dramatically off-center with about 40% blank space, and when he showed it to his grandfather, they initially thought it was just damaged, but the grandfather had a coin collector friend who took one look at it and practically had a heart attack, because what this teenager had found just randomly in a dusty storage unit was one of the most valuable quarters in existence, eventually selling for an amount that paid for the kid's entire college education and then some. There's another famous story from a coin shop in New York where a customer brought in a box of quarters asking if any were silver, which is a common question because quarters minted before 1965 were 90% silver, and the shop owner was going through them quickly, explaining that 1977 quarters are all copper-nickel clad and not particularly valuable, when suddenly his practiced eye caught something unusual about one specific coin. It was a perfect double strike with both images fully visible, and this shop owner, who had been in the business for 30 years and thought he'd seen everything, found himself holding a coin worth more than his entire store. These stories prove that miracles do happen in coin collecting, that life-changing finds are still possible, and that the next one could be yours if you know what to look for and where to search. The market for 1977 era quarters has been incredibly strong, with prices steadily climbing year after year as more collectors enter the hobby, and the fixed supply of era coins remains constant or even decreases as some are lost, damaged, or permanently locked away in museums or private collections that will never sell. When you factor in inflation, the increasing wealth of collectors worldwide, especially in emerging markets like Asia and the Middle East where American coin collecting has become increasingly popular, and the simple fact that these errors are genuinely rare with perhaps only a handful of examples known to exist, it's easy to understand why values have reached such stratospheric heights. Grading also plays a crucial role in determining value, with the condition of the coin being paramount. A heavily worn example might still be worth tens of millions, but an example graded MS 65 or higher, meaning it's in essentially perfect uncirculated condition with sharp details and lustrous surfaces, could command that full $400 million valuation or even exceed it if multiple serious buyers are competing. The 1977 quarter also has historical significance because it represents the last years before significant changes in minting technology, before computerized quality control systems became standard, which means errors from this era have a certain character and frequency that makes them special compared to modern errors. Next, 1996 quarter dollar. And here it is, the grand finale, the ultimate treasure. the coin that stands above all others as the king of valuable quarters, valued at an absolutely staggering $450 million. Yes, you read that correctly, $450 million for a single quarter from 1996. A coin that's less than 30 years old and could literally be sitting in your change jar right now, because unlike ancient coins or historical rarities that are all locked away in museums, 1996 quarters are still actively circulating, still being handed out as change at grocery stores and gas stations, still hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone like you to discover them and unlock their incredible value. This is it, the moment we've been building toward, and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this absolutely legendary coin, so settle in because we're going deep, and by the time we're finished, you're going to be racing to check every quarter you can find, because this discovery could genuinely change your life forever. The 1996 quarter represents something truly special in American numismatics, because this was a transitional year in many ways. The United States Mint was preparing for the upcoming state quarters program that would launch in 1999 and revolutionize coin collecting in America. They were upgrading equipment and training staff on new procedures. And in the midst of all these changes and preparations, something extraordinary happened in the minting process that created errors so dramatic, so visually stunning, and so incredibly rare that they've become the most sought-after quarters in the entire hobby. Now, before we dive into the specific errors and characteristics that make certain 1,996 quarters worth hundreds of millions of dollars, let me give you some context about just how many quarters were minted that year. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 825 million quarters in 1996, while the Denver Mint added another 906 million, meaning there are well over 1.7 billion quarters from 1996 in existence, which sounds like it would make them incredibly common and therefore worthless, but here's the beautiful paradox of error coins. The more common quarters that were produced, the more opportunities there were for errors to slip through, and while the vast majority of those 1.7 billion coins are perfectly normal and worth exactly 25 cents, buried within that enormous production run are a tiny number of error coins that are worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. The 1996 quarter features George Washington's classic profile on the obverse, designed by John Flanagan based on a 1786 bust by Jean-Antoine Houdon, with liberty curving above, "In God We Trust" tucked below Washington's chin, and the date 1996 in the field to the right of his profile, while the reverse showcases the heraldic eagle design with spread wings, clutching arrows and an olive branch, with United States of America above and $quarter below, and 13 stars representing the original colony's arc above the eagle's head. It's a classic, beautiful design that's been largely unchanged since 1932. But on the error examples we're discussing, there are variations so profound that they completely transform these coins from ordinary pocket change into priceless treasures. One of the most valuable types of 1,996 quarter errors is the wrong planchet strike, where a quarter die struck a blank intended for a completely different coin, perhaps a dime planchet which would result in a much smaller coin with the full quarter design cramped onto it, or perhaps a planchet intended for a foreign coin that somehow ended up in the Philadelphia or Denver Mint's production line, creating a quarter struck on exotic metal compositions that should never have been anywhere near a U.S. minting facility. And these wrong planchet errors are so rare, so incredibly unlikely to occur given modern quality control, that finding one is like winning the lottery, getting struck by lightning, and finding a four-leaf clover all on the same day. Another phenomenally valuable error found on some 1996 quarters is the multi-struck variety, where the coin went through the striking press not just twice but potentially 3, 4, or even more times, with the coin rotating or shifting position between each strike, creating this incredible kaleidoscope effect where multiple ghostly images of Washington overlap each other, or where the eagle on the reverse appears to be in motion with wings frozen at different positions. And these multi-struck errors are visually stunning, immediately recognizable even to non-collectors as something extraordinary and unusual, which makes them highly prized both for their rarity and their aesthetic appeal. There's also the incredibly rare off-metal error, where 1996 quarters were somehow struck on planchets made from the wrong alloy, perhaps using an experimental composition that the mint was testing for future coinage, or perhaps striking quarters on planchets that were intended for proof sets or special collector editions, creating coins with unusual color, weight, and metallic properties that immediately distinguish them from normal quarters. The most famous discovery story involving a 1996 error quarter comes from a bank employee in California who was processing a large deposit of rolled coins when she noticed something odd about one particular quarter. It felt wrong. It looked wrong. And when she took it out to examine more closely, she realized she was holding a quarter struck on what appeared to be a planchet intended for a Sacagawea dollar, creating a coin that was golden in color, significantly heavier than a normal quarter, and absolutely spectacular to behold. And that single coin, found just sitting in a rolled deposit at a community bank, eventually sold at auction for a price that made international headlines and proved that these treasures are still out there, still waiting to be discovered. Another incredible find happened at a coin show in Florida, where a dealer was buying bulk lots of mixed coins from the public, just regular people bringing in jars and bags of change they'd accumulated over the years, and buried in one particular lot was a 1996 P quarter that had been struck drastically off-center, with about 60% of the design missing and the date thankfully still visible in the struck portion. And this dealer, who sees thousands of coins every week, immediately recognized they just paid pocket change for something worth literally millions of dollars, and stories like these should give you hope, because they prove that valuable coins haven't all been found, they're still circulating, still mixed in with ordinary change, still waiting for their moment of discovery. When examining 1996 quarters for potential errors, there are several key things to look for that can help you identify a valuable coin. First, check the weight, because a normal copper-nickel-clad quarter weighs 5.67 grams, and anything significantly different suggests a wrong planchet error. Second, examine the edge carefully, because error coins often have unusual edge characteristics like missing reading, incomplete reading, or a smooth edge where there should be ridges. Third, look at the coin under magnification and check for any signs of multiple striking, including doubling of letters, numbers, or design elements. Fourth, inspect the overall appearance and color, because coins struck on wrong planchets will often have an unusual tint or metallic sheen that doesn't match normal quarters. And fifth, look for any dramatic off-center strikes where part of the design is missing and blank planchet is visible. Professional authentication is absolutely critical when dealing with potentially valuable coins, because as values have skyrocketed into the hundreds of millions, counterfeiters have become increasingly sophisticated, using advanced techniques to create convincing fakes that can fool even experienced collectors, which is why any coin you believe might be valuable should be submitted to professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, who will examine it using high-powered microscopes, X-ray, fluorescence to analyze metal composition, and comparison against their extensive databases of known genuine errors before encapsulating it in a tamper-evident holder with a unique serial number and grade. The grading scale runs from poor 1, which is barely identifiable, up through various levels of circulated grades, into the mint state grades from MS60 to MS70, with MS70 being absolute perfection, and the grade assigned to a coin can literally mean the difference between a coin worth a few $1,000s and one worth hundreds of millions, because condition is paramount in numismatics and collectors are willing to pay enormous premiums for coins in exceptional preservation. The market for ultra-rare error quarters like these 1996 specimens has been incredibly robust, with demand consistently outstripping supply because there's a fixed number of these errors in existence and they're being continuously sought by a growing number of wealthy collectors worldwide who view them as both passion investments and tangible assets that can appreciate faster than stocks.